So welcome everyone to the Greene County Leaders February 2021 session on resiliency and adaptability. Welcome to those of you who are Greene County Leader alumni and those who are joining for a taste of Greene County Leaders. To everyone joining us now for this session and to everyone joining for a taste. We are so glad you are here. I'm Victoria Solomon. I'm with Extension Greene County. I also want to introduce Cara, Carper, the Executive Director of Greene County Development Corporation, GCDC, and special recognition to the Greene County Leaders Board members. I know we have a number in the session today. So I'm going to do a quick overview of Zoom on the off chance you haven't had experience with that. If you're on a computer, if you go on the lower left hand side, there's a unmute button. If you can mute yourself at this time, we will have lots of discussion, so I just want to make sure you know where that session is. If you're calling in on a phone, *6 will unmute you. Next to that icon, there's an icon for a video. And if you can turn your video on, please do so. We definitely do not judge backgrounds. Kids and pets are welcome to join, and you are definitely more than welcome to have lunch or a snack or a beverage during the session. So in the chat, let's do a quick let's do some quick introductions. If you can put your name, maybe where you're from, what organization or business you're with. Like I said, I'm going to put that in the chat. I'm Victoria Solomon. I'm with Extension Greene County. I work in Monroe. I live outside of Monticello, and I'm co-owner of Perfection Produce LLC. So I know we have some new folks joining. Special welcome to you. We are glad you are here. I want to do a quick introduction to Greene County Leaders. So the purpose of the program is really to help build leadership skills and deepen understanding of community issues here in Greene County communities, and to provide opportunities to create and expand community networks. This program is possible through a partnership with UW-Madison Division of Extension Greene County and Greene County Development Corporation, with strong support from lots of businesses and organizations across Greene County. Today, we are focusing on resiliency and adaptability, and these are leadership skills I feel rather confident in saying we have all been experiencing, growing, and navigating for a while now. We're going to kick things off by defining adaptability. Even before the last year or so, adaptability has definitely been identified as a strong, needed skill for all of us in many ways throughout the many different areas of our life, as communities, as organizations, as businesses, leaders, teams, parents, families, and individuals navigating different life situations. In today's session, a lot of our time will be in breakout discussions because we recognize there is so much expertise and experience at this virtual table. We'll hear from two community leaders about how they've been navigating challenges and opportunities to be more adaptable and more resilient. And finally, we'll close with an opportunity for small group discussion to share big takeaways from today. Our first piece today is on the relationship of adaptability to emotional intelligence and IQ. These are some key components of leadership that I know personally I've been drawing on for the last 2 years. I've been growing in these skills, and like I said, I don't think I'm the only one. I think the idea of being adaptable and the idea of being resilient, they're both complex. So to have conversations about these in community and to learn from one another, I definitely think this is a great opportunity to learn and grow. Given how things are these days with so much happening, I'm optimistic we will each learn from the session and conversations today about further intentionally applying adaptability and resiliency. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chris Wellington, one of the founders of Greene County Leaders, and Lori Rodefeld, Medical Education Manager and Coach with Monroe Clinic and Greene County Leaders Board Chair. So I just want to check in. Lori or Chris, if you're speaking, we cannot hear you.
Okay. Lori, could you remove the screen share for just a minute?
Oh, absolutely.
Thanks. Thanks. Sorry about that. I'm going to start out this morning by just thinking a little bit about a story that we learned back in Greene County Leaders during your days at Greene County Leaders. And I know some of you have not gone through the Greene County Leaders program. Here's an invitation to do so. But the Greene County Leaders Group, we talked early on about a story about an empty teacup. And I'm going to retell that story right now because a lot of it relates to the mindset of adaptability. So there's a young monk in Japan, and he is traveling from monastery to monastery. He's carrying a heavy briefcase full of papers that he has written, things that he has been reading, books that he loves. And he's visiting from monastery to monastery, and he decides to head up into the mountains to meet with an old Zen master in a very remote monastery. He arrives there heavily laden with his books and his papers, and he knocks on the door. And the doorkeeper comes to the door and he invites him to come in. And he says, I'll take you into the room of the Zen master. And this young monk walks into the Zen master's room, sits down, and the Zen master asks him, would you like a cup of tea? And this young man says, oh, yes, he'd love a cup of tea. He's been traveling a lot. And he proceeds to tell the Zen master all the things that he has been doing and learning as he's been traveling throughout Japan, how many monasteries he's visited, all the papers he's written, and the books that he's been reading and how wonderful they are. And the Zen master says, well, would you like me to fill your teacup? And the monk hands the teacup, holds the teacup out, and the Zen master begins to pour the cup full of tea. And he fills it, and he fills it, and he continues to fill it, and he continues to fill it until the teacup brims full and falls over onto the table and onto his lap. The Zen monk says, what are you doing? And the Zen master says, it seems to me that you came to this monastery with a very full teacup, and maybe you need to put aside some of your ideas, and you need to have a humbleness of mind in order to come here and learn anything. So what does that story tell us about adaptability? We oftentimes think of adaptability as something like, you just do what you have to do when things change, right? But actually, adaptability is really a lot deeper than that. It starts with a mindset. And the mindset is a mindset of the empty teacup. The mind that comes with an open sense of willingness to listen, willingness to look at the situation. So Laura, if you'd put up that definition for us. So you'll see here a definition that came right out of the dictionary of adaptability. Says the ability to greet and analyze changes in the public space, marketplace, consumer preferences, or technological changes that allows individuals and businesses to clearly see the big picture, weigh alternatives, and quickly take action. What are some of the words in that definition that speak to you or that talk to you specifically about adaptability? Anybody want to choose a couple words?
I think one of the words that strikes me is see the big picture.
See the big picture. Great, Mary Lou. Good thought.
I just think greet. Because you're just like saying hi.
Yeah. Becky, I like that concept. The idea that we're willing to greet an idea and you're willing to be open to it. When we greet somebody, we're being open to it, aren't we? Yeah. Good. Very good. Anybody else? Okay, Lori, maybe you could remove that.
Chris, I was going to say, I think part of it is also talking about seeing other people's views, right? It's
Yeah.
not an introspective analysis. It's kind of an outside.
Yeah, looking outwards. Yep. Very good. Nice thoughts, Al. Anybody else have any thoughts on it? Well, here's the good news. We're all born very adaptable. We're born into this world with the DNA of adaptability. It's as we grow older, we have so many experiences that bring to our lives preconceived notions. So these preconceived notions become something that we resort to or devolve to instead of being wide open to the world. So sometimes our adaptability is compromised by all these things that have happened to us in our life. Oh, I know that. Oh, I've seen that before. Oh, I know that person. She isn't very whatever. You know, we come to the world with all these ideas, these preconceived notions. So it's a very wonderful thing to realize that basically we are very adaptable and we just have to develop a skill. It's a skill that we develop, not in a mindset that we have, not just who we are or the way we are. So we can grow to become a lot more adaptable. So Lori is going to talk to you a little bit about the connection between your adaptability quotient. How many of you took the assessment? If you did, can you raise your hand? So we have a couple of people, yep, who've taken the AQ test. Lori's going to talk to you about AQ, emotional quotient, and IQ. AQ, EQ, and IQ.
Great. I'm going to share my screen again. And as Chris noted, adaptability, it's something that has kind of come on our radar more recently, especially with Greene County leaders. It was, I believe, the fall of 2019 is when we incorporated this into the curriculum. And little did we know, COVID was right around the corner. And I think that all of us have really learned to embrace our AQ, maybe by force, not by choice. And I really liked this image. Victoria has actually been here. It's a place in Thailand, and you'll see that this person is rock climbing. That person is harnessing their AQ, because AQ is really, like Chris said, it's a skill that you develop, and sometimes that is by choice. Maybe you're trying something new that you haven't done before. You're stepping out of your comfort zone, and then after you kind of overcome that new challenge or new obstacle, you grow in your AQ. And a lot of experts have kind of analyzed IQ, which we're all familiar with. That's our day-to-day knowledge that we have, our technical expertise. But the real measure of success isn't your IQ, it's your EQ and your AQ. And as you look at, this statistic, and this has been thrown out in many different circles of, human resources professionals, management consultants, they've all agreed that kind of it's that 80-20 split where it's 20% IQ, but your success is really your EQ and your AQ, and finding opportunities to grow both of those. And I would actually argue that, in today's changing world, AQ may be more important than EQ. Jobs are going to change. AI is becoming more common. You just look at everything that we've been through in the past year with COVID. We're all learning how to be more adaptable, and it's actually kind of a triangle. There's IQ on one point, EQ on one point, and AQ on one point. So they're all interconnected. So kind of keep that in mind with this context. So we'll just kind of quick go through the comparison. And what I did was, kind of compared EQ versus AQ, but I'll go through each one and talk about what it is and just kind of give you a little more explanation. So emotional intelligence is also something that we should all be pretty familiar with. It's something that has been talked about since the early 1990s. It's hard to believe it's been around for almost 30 years, but it's really your ability to monitor, understand, and act upon your emotions. It's really your self-awareness, knowing if you respond in an emotional way to something, looking and self-reflecting on like, well, why? And how can I become more empathetic? How can I become more authentic? Can you develop flexibility in your communication style and use that as a tool to negotiate conflicts? And EQ is really evident in team situations where you're able to, really help develop and grow a team, really being open to constructive criticism, again, not letting your emotions kind of respond to something, but instead really kind of taking that step back and trying to consider someone else's perspective, someone else's thoughts. So really it's built by, being mindful of your emotions, thinking about your communication style, thinking about how inclusive you're being, and really taking responsibility for your own emotions. And it's something that, again, like we talked about, you can build your EQ, you can build your AQ. So it is something that, while you may have some EQ right out of the gate, it's something that you can build on. It's something that can grow. And really EQ is, I think, essential in contributing to the culture of a team. AQ is something a little different, and that's how you respond to difficult situations or rapid change. And that actually, the term was first coined in the 1990s, the late 1990s. I think 1997 was the first time someone had referred to adaptability or adversity quotient. And it's something that I only found out about a couple of years ago myself. And that's kind of how we incorporated this into the curriculum is, this is something that, we felt was really important to address. And again, little did we know COVID would teach us so much more about our own adaptability. But those with high AQ, they have really developed a way to respond to difficult situations and rapid change. And really that's through optimism, being willing to innovate, being agile, not fearing change. And AQ really is something that you build upon by weathering the storms in life and thriving in adversity. And, it's measured by examining how you adapt to issues and setbacks and then looking forward as new things come your way. How do I overcome this? I've been through this before. I've handled similar situations successfully, and you really develop your confidence in, navigating change or difficult circumstances. And your AQ can really help you implement necessary change with teams, with yourself. And I know we've talked a lot about COVID, but, with regard to that, I want everybody to think about ways that you can build your own AQ or your own EQ as well. But with AQ, it doesn't have to be COVID that's leading you through, this journey to become more adaptable or more resilient. Could just be, imagine once the pandemic is over, which hopefully it won't be going on for too much longer. What are ways that you can build your adaptability? Thinking about, for example, you could try a new skill. You could try rock climbing, like this picture, and it may be something that scares you, but when you overcome it, you develop that confidence that you can thrive in stressful situations. And you don't have to try rock climbing. It could be something simple. I mean, you could try running a marathon. You could take a leadership role that, maybe you wouldn't have done before. Again, adaptability can be built in so many ways. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a pandemic, but I do think it's important, as you're looking at adaptability and, overcoming these obstacles, that there's really kind of, two different sides to it. And one side is that, you have change brought upon you that you really don't have a lot of choice over. Then the other side is something where maybe you do have some ability to react to the change. But I think regardless, you just want to look at, how are you reacting to the change? Are you being optimistic? Are you willing to innovate? Are you willing to kind of, take that extra effort? So we thought it was interesting to kind of, look at the difference between adaptability and so it's AQ and EQ, just to kind of set the stage for our discussion. But the good news is that you can grow in either way. And as leaders, I think it's really important to continue growing in our EQ and our AQ. So we did distribute the quiz ahead of time. We do have this up on the screen. I don't want any of you to see the scoring metrics, but I would like each of you to just take a couple of minutes, if you haven't taken the quiz already, to just give yourself a quick score on your adaptability. And if you have already done this, please just take some time to reflect on the assessment and just different thoughts that you have regarding the questions. So we'll just take a couple of minutes. Everybody can take the assessment, come up with their score, and then we'll debrief. All right, so most of you have hopefully had a chance to take your AQ quiz. We are going to give you some time in the breakout rooms to discuss this, but I did want to just kind of get some initial thoughts or reactions to the questions, to your scores. Down below is just kind of, the rating. So again, highly adaptable is that 38 to 48. Fairly adaptable is 25 to 40. Not as adaptable as you'd like to be is 0 to 25. Did anybody have any thoughts on the questions, any reactions when you read some of the questions, things that are hard or that you struggle with, or things that are easy?
Lori, I would say that the biggest struggle that I have personally is number 12, right? A lot of people probably struggle with that maybe as well. Being comfortable with not knowing, even though that's supposed to be in your wheelhouse. There's a lot of things that people don't know.
I would agree, Al. That's something that I struggle with as someone who likes to be in control or be able to, even, be resilient and adaptable. If you know what's coming, it's easier to kind of move ahead, but it's hard when you don't know what the future is going to look like. It's hard to plan when you don't know what the future is going to look like. Any other thoughts?
Number 6 was a tough one for me. To have to reach out for help and acknowledge assistance when needed.
I think you're not alone. There's a lot of us who struggle asking for help, especially, if you're a go-getter and you like to take charge and you like to make things happen, to, ask for assistance. It can be tough, or delegating to people sometimes. That can be tough. Sometimes you might not have many people to help with what you need help with, so that can be difficult. Other things that anyone struggled with?
Well, did anyone else sort of assign yourself like a range? Like as I was going through, my brain was going to all sorts of different situations, and I'm like, well, sometimes this, sometimes that, sometimes this, sometimes that. So I'm like, that either that means I'm like, potentially uber adaptable, or just can't make a decision, one or the other.
Probably depends on the situation. And like I said earlier, that whole, do you have control over it or do you not? Because I do think that, it's easy to be adaptable when it's your idea. It's a little more difficult to be adaptable when, someone else comes in and says, we're going to do this way. And, maybe you haven't had input, or maybe you haven't, maybe you don't agree. And it is hard to be positive and innovative, if you feel like you don't have control. But again, and I think it's very situational. I mean, there's certain things that are thrust on you that it's hard to be adaptable.
Yeah, most of the time it was like, well, it wasn't a problem, you know, but it was like, but there was that one time where I didn't like the way this person said something or blah, blah, blah. And then I did this. And then there's other times. So I just kind of was like, well, so my range, I won't tell you what my range was, but I actually thought ended up being a little more adaptable than I thought, but
But again, it probably depends on the situation. So it's almost situational adaptability. But, you know, I would just encourage all of you to think about that. Like, you know, if there is a situation where you're not being as adaptable as you'd like to be, think about why and, you know, do some self-reflection on that. I think that that's really powerful. And, you know, again, you know, we can grow our AQ. So, you know, that's probably the opportunity that we all have. And I think, like I said, COVID has taught us to be much more adaptable and resilient. And, you know, becoming more uncomfortable with uncertainty. But it doesn't, you know, mean that we're done. It means that, you know, we still have a ways to go. And I think that if anything, it's brought the importance of this skill, you know, really to the forefront. So we do want to give you guys time to talk in groups in breakouts. And Victoria is working on setting breakout groups up. We are going to share this in the chat so you can all see what the questions are, but we would like each group to just focus on these different questions in breakout one. So again, just one thing that surprised you about the quiz. So we kind of talked about that, but talk about that a little bit more because not everybody participated. How do you think that we can develop adaptability in our own leadership skill set or in our organizations? How is your personal AQ related to your organization's adaptability? Because there is kind of the personal side of AQ, but then there's also how adaptable is the organization that you work with, and kind of think about that difference between, you know, your personal AQ versus the organizational AQ. How do you practice being curious? How do you practice being adaptable? And then we're going to ask that you each try to share one thing with the large group when you're done. So Victoria, are we ready to move everyone into breakout rooms?
We are. So I'm going to quick pause the recording. The breakout sessions will not be recorded.
Well, welcome back, everybody. How did your breakout sessions go? Were there any great thoughts that came out of your session? And if so, what was that? Anybody want to share about that?
Chris, I think I can share a little bit. I think our group had a very nice discussion about adaptability, especially with COVID and different things going on, and even adaptability through, you know, the changing generations. You know, our group talked a little bit about, you know, our kids' adaptability or younger people's adaptability might be different than older people's adaptability, because, like, for example, the example I gave, my kids are not used to adapting. They haven't gotten through a few iterations of change, and now they're having to deal with COVID, right? And as an older employee, you know, you go, you know, as a middle level employee, you go to the older employee that has more experience, and they've got tons of adaptability because they've already done it. They've seen that. Yep, we had that problem, and we kind of have an idea of which direction to head. So it kind of almost talks to that whole stepping process. The other thing we talked about is with team adaptability, it's good to know that everyone is you work with your team and get a comfort level so that you know that no one's going to get left behind as you're moving through the change.
Great points. Another group want to share something?
I can
Chris.
share.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, Chris, our team talked a little bit about confidence and experience and when you're the expert, and how that can almost be an impediment to adaptability, and how we likened it to the original conversation about the teacup and how you filled your teacup in that particular area, and so you're not ready to take in expertise or advice from others. We talked about toddlers. If you've experienced toddlers and people are talking, do you say, you know, oh, have you lived that life yet? I already know, and this is the way we should be doing it. So we thought it was a little bit interesting that confidence can actually impede adaptability.
That's really an interesting point, Tom. I like that point a lot. And isn't it interesting how toddlers, they don't have any trouble adapting because they're just looking at the world just as it is right now. They're not trying to put on their own feelings about things or attitudes. They mostly just come right to the point right now. This is what's happening. Great point. I like that a lot. Anybody else?
Well, Chris, our group really just reiterated that this has certainly been the year of adaptability daily. Things are changing weekly. But also we discussed the different layers that people have had to adapt, right? So we've all had to adapt personally at home, our work situations, we've had to adapt. And then we've also had to adapt, I spoke personally on the community needs, right? So I may have thought these were the community needs, or this is where we started. And then as information came in and we learned more things, we had to pivot and shift to, because these were the more significant community needs, and these are the things we had to address right away. So having those different layers. And then we also took some time to celebrate and say, okay, we all had to do this. And what were some takeaways, or what were some successes, right? And so I think everyone talked about some things that we've had to adapt and change that we're going to continue. Especially with some digital things and some technology, things that maybe forced us to adapt more quickly than maybe we were ready for, but are good changes and things that we're excited to continue.
Wonderful thought, Teresa. Thank you. Anybody else?
Mary Lou brought up a good point in our group. She talked about, what do you do when you're going into different groups and you find yourself having to be the one that adapts to everybody else that you're working with, inflexible people. Is that fair to you? Or how do you make it so it is?
Did you come to any great conclusions, any great ideas on how to deal with that?
I'll let her answer that.
No, but I think just recognizing the fact that it is a fact of life, and part of a leader, what their responsibility is to try to get the rest of the team to work with you and move with you. But I guess sometimes it does bring a little bit of frustration that that a situation does have to be approached from a different way, and everybody wants it's easier and a lot more comfortable to keep doing the tried and true.
Sure.
But this year has forced people to look away from the tried and true. So the year itself is in some ways accomplishing that.
Sure. And we all know situations on a national and international scale that didn't adapt too well. I mean, you think about the war in Vietnam and how, we got into the war in Vietnam and we just kept doing the same thing over and over and over again and over again. And there was seemingly no way to break out of that. Or same thing, war in Iraq and some of the other political situations, that you get yourself into a mode of doing something and you don't necessarily find it easy to break out and do something different. So that's a really good point. I think that good leadership requires bringing those team members along, because if they don't come along, that's when you have divisions and you can have a team that falls apart when not all people are on board with a new concept or a new idea or a new direction. So excellent point, Mary Lou.
I would just add that really connects to the interplay between AQ and EQ, because again, you need to have that awareness before you're moving forward with a change of where is your team at and how do you get them to where they need to be? Because if they're not ready, that change could falter horribly. So again, it's, just kind of understanding the team dynamics, the culture, and what you can influence and what you can't. But I think that's a really good point, Mary Lou. I really like that, that thought.
Yeah, awesome. All right, Lori, would you put up the 14 points for me?
Yes.
So to sort of summarize here, or at least to this is an article from Forbes magazine. described 14 signs of an adaptable person. Adaptable people experiment. They see opportunity when others see failure. They're resourceful and have contingency plans. They think ahead. They don't whine. They talk to themselves with positive self-talk. That's that optimism that Lori was talking about. They don't blame or play the victim. They don't claim fame or responsibility, or they don't claim fame for things that they do, but they give credit where credit is due. They're curious. They keep learning. Curiosity keeps coming up here. They adapt to what they see around them right now at this moment. They stay current with exactly what's happening at this moment. They see the big picture, the forest for the trees. They're creative. They think outside the box, and they know what they stand for. They have strong values and principles. This was actually an article in Forbes magazine about 2 years ago. So in summary then, and Laura, you can move it on up to the summary. It should be the next slide. Yeah. So in summary, it's really the 3 steps that you might want to think about. It a takeaway, a very easy takeaway from this is 3 steps to think about. First of all, that staying curious, or we could say it's not knowing, and not knowing is not knowing what to do. It's not knowing all the answers, right? You're open and curious about new possibilities and answers. And you have a mindset that is willing to listen to new information and new ideas. So that's point number 1. You come to it with a mindset of curiosity. Second of all, you observe carefully what's happening right now at this moment. So you're looking at the situation, not some idea of what you thought the situation was yesterday, or you remember how it was 10 years ago, or you're worried about how it's going to be tomorrow. You're looking at the situation exactly as it is at this moment. And finally, you take actions on the facts that you have. That means, again, looking at the facts right now in this particular moment. So if there's a takeaway from the session, it might be those very simple things that you can do to stay open, observe carefully, and take action based on the facts. So our next section is an interview with Kathy Hennessy. Kathy Hennessy is the executive director of the Monroe Arts Center. Some of you met her in a previous session of Greene County Leaders. And Kathy has been very busy trying to keep the Arts Center going during the COVID times. And I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about it. Kathy, tell us about how art centers are navigating the whole COVID thing. You're muted, Kath. You're muted.
Okay, thank you, Chris. First of all, I want to say thank you for asking me to join you all again. The last time I was here, as Chris mentioned, was actually about a year ago on March 23rd, which was about 10 days after we closed. So the first thing I really want to say is that our thoughts are really with all of those who have been directly affected by COVID. And, you know, we've lost several friends and patrons of MAC, and we just feel this loss so deeply. And I think that the last year has changed all of us in so many ways that we've yet to discover. But to get back to Chris's question, it really runs the gamut, Chris. I'm very fortunate that I have a lot of contacts across the country just from previous lives that I've had, and in different theaters and different sizes of theaters. And we meet on Friday nights on Zoom just to talk about what we're all doing and sort of bolster each other and float ideas. And it really runs the gamut. Some of them have closed permanently. Some of them are, the one theater that we meet with is the Barrington Stage Company, which has been the first theater back with equity contracts. So that's in New York. So that's been an interesting thing to watch. Other of them are just shuttered for right now and just closing their doors and hoping that they can hang on until they have the ability to reopen. And people like us here at MAC, we're just trying new things, trying to do virtual entertainment, virtual classes, just anything we can think of. So honestly, it just kind of runs the gamut of what's happening.
How has it felt to you, Lori, to navigate, or Kathy, to navigate this? How has it felt personally as a leader? I think that one of the things that we sometimes forget is how much this level of adaptability, particularly at the organizational level, how much it takes out of the leaders and of the people that are making our organizations work. How does it feel to you to have led through this big change?
Well, it's really been a double-edged sword, right? We were talking about IQ, EQ, and AQ, and so it's really been sort of a mixture of all those things for me. So I feel like I'm constantly scanning the environment to look for grants or funds that might be available to help us. So that's one thing that I'm constantly doing. On the other hand, I have to stay really on top of the scientific research on COVID so that I can make decisions, so that I can distinguish fact from fiction and make decisions based on that. One of the really hardest things for me has been adjusting to the fact that we're not going to make it through this without letting some of our staff go. And that was probably the most difficult thing for me personally, not just because their work had to be picked up by the remaining staff, which is one side of it, but also because we're a really small staff and it was personal. It was just not easy. The other thing, just continuing to fulfill our mission, to stay creative, to stay connected to our community, and every decision has to be based on that. And I know that I need to reinvent the wheel every single day that I come to work, that I need to show up every day at 100% and be the most creative self that I've ever been in my life, and that our survival depends on that. So then that sort of, leads us into the whole emotional quotient, right? Like how's all that? So it's part of that is finding ways to deal with my own stress, which I don't think I've been particularly successful at. I don't have that one go-to thing that just, like go home and watch Buffy episodes and I feel better about it all, but I just don't. But part of that too is being aware that the staff is also stressed, as we were talking about in our breakout room. They're stressed at home. They're stressed at work. They're stressed going to Walmart. Like everywhere you go is stressful. And that I have to recognize that as somebody who leads the staff. And also that sometimes for some of the staff, coming to work is their release valve, like not being at home and dealing with the stress there, that this is what's helping them stay, sane. The other thing that's been really sort of emotionally hard to wrap my head around a little bit is that as important as MAC is to me and to the staff and to this community, it's not life or death here. And that's exactly what people are dealing with right now. So that's, kind of a weird place to be. And I also, I recently had a really pretty spirited conversation with a friend of mine who is a theater critic in Pittsburgh, and he's reviewed over 5,000 productions. So this guy knows what he's talking about. And the conversation was, he says, theater's dead. We're sunk in the water. It's never going to come back. My argument with him was that, frankly, and his thing was that young people are never going to go to theaters now. And my answer to him was, frankly, that's always been our problem, right? Like, but the reality is that theater's always been on the brink of disaster. It's always been declared dead countless times over. And here we are, right? So I feel like people have the innate desire to gather and create shared experiences. And I find peace in that. I find hope in that. And I really do believe that. But lately too, it's been this weird sort of FOMO thing that I've been feeling. So I've read the research and I think I understand how vaccine distribution is going to go. And I know that theaters and places where people that gather will be the last places to reopen. And I'm very confident in the decisions that MAC is making. But I still look at other places that are opening in March and June, and it just like, wait, what, do you know something I don't? Like, come on, like share. So, you know, there's kind of that. From an adaptability standpoint, when we closed last March 16th, we were 1 week away from one of our largest fundraisers of the year. We were in the middle of a sold out youth art class that had been building momentum for 3 years. There were 2 performance in schools programs to take place over the next 4 days. We were 4 days out from a gallery opening and an artist reception. We were 5 days out from a wedding. We were 12 days out from the opening of Mac's new comedy club. And we were on track to finish one of the most successful years that we've ever had. None of those things happened in the way that they should have. But, you know, we're adaptable. We have that sort of show must go on mentality around here. So we've held our fundraisers, that particular fundraiser we held by mail, and then we found ways to do the rest of our yearly fundraisers virtually. The youth art class, along with a lot of other classes, moved online successfully. We've actually created a virtual classroom here at MAC that we're about to open up to the community to use if people are teaching and need a place. We started to take advantage of our outdoor spaces in better ways with summer concerts, and we were able to continue our family and kids series outside. We began to create original programming and offer it virtually, which is something that I had always, you know, kind of been interested in doing. We streamed live concerts. We reopened our galleries by appointment. And probably most importantly, we created partnerships with other communities groups like the Women's Club and Main Street Monroe and the Multicultural Outreach Program. And we've offered our facility for vaccine distribution in the event that a bigger space is needed. So, you know, it's just, like I said, it's coming in every day, reinventing the wheel. That was a really long-winded answer, Chris. Sorry.
Well, thank you very much for that. It sounds like you've been very successful, and it sounds as though you instead of having a time when you have had to shrink your ability to respond, you've really done just the opposite. You've been able to open up that ability, and whereas maybe you couldn't do one great big huge thing, you're now doing a lot of smaller things that are really meeting the needs of the community and following your mission.
Well, I think it's really difficult to say right now that we've been successful, just in the sense that we're still really in the thick of things here. And even though there's an end in sight, I think it's going to be still a long haul for us. Theaters are going to be the last thing to open. Hopefully, we were talking this morning, maybe we can get the kids back in here sooner rather than later, you know, depending on what the school district does. So I think we have a little bit of a ways to go before we declare success. But I think we are on the right path. Everyone on our staff will have to be vaccinated before we can open. So we're in the last group. Everyone on staff is in the last group to get vaccinated. And then you know, notwithstanding vaccinations, when will people feel safe to gather again in groups like we have here? And in particular, being a theater and having stopped dead in the water, there's going to be startup costs that, you know, we have to figure out how to manage that. But I will say a couple things that I think that we have done well. And I think that we have found ways, as you said, to stay connected to our community because we've been taking advantage of all the different platforms that we have, you know, like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. At the same time, realizing that not all of our constituents are connected by the internet. And so we've also tried to take advantage of phone calls and emails and, you know, newsletters and things like that. We've continued our education programs and some entertainment programming, but the reality is that we've not been able to monetize that. So that's kind of a whole different subject. The one thing I think we did really right was that we created a sustainability group that is made up of MAC board members, MAC Foundation board members, and community members, so that we've really been able through that group to tackle a lot of different subjects from a variety of viewpoints. So I think that when it's time for us to reopen, we're going to be ready to reopen. So
thank you very much, Kathy. We really appreciate your insights into adaptability. You certainly, like all of us, have had a busy year. I think when you're the main leader of a very small organization, you see it up close and personal. Thank you.
for sure. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to turn it over to Lori now. She's going to introduce Laura Eicher from the New Glarus Elementary School.
So I get the honor of interviewing Laura in kind of the same format. Laura is a Greene County Leaders alumni from a few years back, and she is the principal at New Glarus Elementary. That is where my daughter goes to school. They are doing an excellent job with their response to COVID and keeping kids in school. But we just thought, Laura, it would be great if you could kind of share with us, similar to Kathy, kind of what is the current state of adaptability in education? Like, what do things look like in the education world now that we're in almost a year into COVID?
Well, I don't know that we would have ever adapted the way we have had COVID not have happened. You know, I don't think education is kind of one of those ships that's really hard to turn and to pivot in a new direction. But when the door was slammed shut on March 13th, we had no choice but to find new ways to doing what we're supposed to do. I think the first thing that we did, and I really have to say, this is about teamwork. In an organization like a school district, it really needs to be about everybody gathering on the team together. So first thing we did, I remember that Monday morning after schools were closed and we came together as an administrative team, our first question is, what's best for kids? What do we need to do to make sure that we're servicing the reason we're here? You know, why are we here? We're here to learn. What are we doing to make sure that kids learn and that teachers can still provide the education? So I think that was the piece, that how do we adapt what we do to keep doing our mission, to make sure that our mission is on track. I will say that it's been empowering and exhausting, right? We have been empowered to learn new things, to do things in new ways that are amazing. We just got done doing a survey because we've done so many different things this year, from logistical kinds of things, how we run a building, how we run a day, to instructional kinds of things. Some things we want to keep, like we found new ways and we want to keep them. And so how do we keep what we like, and how do we say, let it go to the things that we would love to see go away? And so we just did a staff survey. And I want feedback from teachers, right? Because it's a team, we need to do this together. And so that's the empowering part. The exhausting part is that it's been every day is trying to figure out how to manage that day. I think, you know, how successful have we been? I think that's still to be determined. I don't know how successful. Now, some days I feel super successful, like, wow, that's really working. And the next day something happens, you're like, oh my golly, we're never going to make it. This is, you know, how are we going to make sure that kids are learning? And so I think that's a day-to-day feeling. And I also like to think that we're never done, right? We're always learning. That adaptability, like we need to adapt for today, but we need to adapt for tomorrow. And we just had a training with a national speaker with all of our teachers. And one of the things that he said, which has been really sticking with me, I've been ruminating on it, is, you know, if the federal government had in Washington, D.C. had put forth a decree of some kind that said, okay, schools, you all need to be able to offer a virtual learning platform by 2021. Fall of 2021, you have to have a virtual learning. Everybody would have thrown up their hands and said, there's not enough time. You didn't give us anything to plan for. There's no money for this. You know, there would have been crisis. You can't make us do this. There would have been an uproar. And then, you know, the federal government probably would have said, okay, by 2025, 26 or something, they pushed it down the road. And things would have gone on just as they have for the last 100 years. Bring kids to school, sit them in desks, do your thing. yep, we give them virtual tools while they're here, but what does that really look like to do a virtual platform? And lo and behold, we didn't have a choice. It was thrust upon us. And then how you adapted to that really determines how successful your kids are going to be. So the requirement to be adaptive is going to mean the success or detriment to our students. So yeah. I also like to think, some of the lessons that we've learned. I'm just looking at the questions, Lori, that you gave me. I hope that's
No,
okay.
this is great. This is great. Just it's excellent to hear you sharing. And yeah, if you just want to even talk about the lessons that you've learned or that your staff have learned, and even I think connecting it maybe to the AQ and EQ might be interesting too. And you kind of alluded to that a little bit about the importance of the team and getting them on board with change. And
yep. And I think always going back to why do we exist? Why are we here? What's our mission? What's our purpose? That helps with the adaptability piece. Like if I know why we're doing something, it makes sense to change, right? If I know why we're going to use, let's say, for instance, this is a little probably educationally, but we have an app called Seesaw for little kids. If we know why we're using Seesaw for little kids, then teachers adapting to that change and how they're delivering activities instruction makes sense to them rather than just because the administrator told us to do it, right? But then that was also part of a team decision. I think that's one of the things that we've probably learned more than anything else is that we need to be able to rely on one another, that no one can do this alone. And that we have to stick together. If we go rogue, we're going to fail on our own, but we stick together, we can do some pretty awesome, amazing things if we can be in it together. One thing we often talk about, and maybe this goes along with the adaptability piece, is with kids, we talk about brick brain versus bubblegum brain. And so a brick brain is somebody who's just stuck. And it kind of goes along with the Carol Dweck mindset work, fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And so that brick brain is like a fixed mindset, like it just can only fit in this box. It is stuck, it is tight. There is no really moving it. And a bubblegum brain can flex and grow and change and find different ways of looking at problems. And so I think we've had to do a lot of that. For one of my jobs is transportation. And so how are we going to transport kids to school? Like, this is impossible. We can't put kids on buses together. We had to figure out a way to do it, right? If you have just a brick brain fixed mindset, it's really hard to think about new ways. And I think that's a piece of adaptability that you were sharing, Lori.
Oh, I love that. We all need a little bit more of a bubblegum brain. That's one takeaway for today. I don't know what is. Laura, can you talk about what it kind of took as a leader to move your organization into a new direction? And was it difficult? Like, what were some of the challenges? Did you discover you had new skills that maybe you didn't realize you had before?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that we've completely moved. I think, one of the things that was first most difficult is staff, right? How do we bring staff together? And so that skill of being able to find common ground with lots of different opinions and voices. So that was the first piece. And I will tell you, I spent a lot of time having individual conversations with people. That is really, I think, in a place where you need to make great changes, everybody feeling like their voice is heard is really, really important. I'll tell you, it was a lot of time, but I think it's time well spent. So it's a lot of front loading, but it's time well spent because then people feel like the decisions were made, but I know that Laura heard what I said. And so that piece of it, and then of course there's the whole community side of that too. So once we have an idea about how we're going to go forth, opening our schools and bringing kids back in, and then there's the communicating that with families and our community at large. And so communication skills I have found to be really, really critical. Good listening skills as well as good expressive skills, right? There's the receptive and the expressive in both of those in that situation. So being able to listen, being able to communicate. I would also say that's very time consuming, but it's really critical, really important. So maybe you haven't always been a communicator, or maybe you shouldn't have communicated like you should. I think this is one of those skills that you figured out, like, I'm really good at that, or I need to beef myself up in that area of communication.
Oh, I think that that's great, Laura. I think it really ties into kind of what we were talking about with, kind of that interplay between EQ and AQ, because you could have great AQ and you could roll forward with a bunch of changes, but if you're not listening to people, if you're not taking their feedback into consideration, if they don't feel like they're being heard, the change isn't going to work, and the change might not be effective either if you're not spending that time just listening to people, making sure that they feel like their voice is being heard. Laura, what kind of one thing are you optimistic or hopeful for in 2021 as we look ahead? Just kind of any final parting thoughts, silver linings, things that you want to keep from the lessons you've learned over the past year.
We talk a lot about silver linings. Every situation, no matter how dark and gloomy, cloudy, there is a silver lining in it. So I think one of the things we've learned is that we don't always have to be in the same space to have collaborative conversations, right? Collaboration is so critical, and sometimes finding time in the day to do that, but we can all come together in this sort of format. Is it ideal? Nope, but I think this is something that's here to stay, especially parent-teacher conferences. Like, why would we make parents walk in this building, take time off work for, like, say, IEP meetings or any of that stuff, when they could, do over their lunch hour, meet with a teacher or somebody in this kind of format? Like, why didn't we think of this before? This technology is not new. It's been around for a while, but gosh, let's use our new tools to really optimize our ability to communicate with one another. So I think that's one of our new ahas. I'm really looking forward to having all kids back in the building. But I'm also looking forward to how we're going to reach our kids who are always going to be virtual. I mean, that's going to be something new for us. We're always going to be virtual. So.
No, those are great thoughts, Laura, and I completely agree. And I think, from my experience, I was someone who always preferred in-person, face-to-face discussions. I did not like doing things online. But again, I've adapted and I've pivoted, and, I think we've all gotten better using Zoom and using technology and connecting with other people using technology. And it took a pandemic for us to get comfortable with it. But just think how much more convenient a lot of these things are. Getting together for Greene County Leaders over the lunch hour, people not having to drive, people not having to, take extra time off of work. It's been definitely a silver lining for all of us. Well, thank you, Laura. That was a great conversation. So good to reconnect and even see you. I haven't seen you all year. But yes, I think, it was definitely fun to hear your perspectives and hear your thoughts. So what we're going to do is we have another round of breakouts for everyone. I am going to share my screen with some questions we'd like you to discuss during your breakout. So we just want to kind of continue this discussion regarding adaptability. So here are the questions, and again, we'll put them in the chat for you to each see. But just like and some of you may have discussed this in the last breakout, but how has COVID changed you as a leader? What did you learn from Kathy and from Laura? After today's session, what will you tell your team about how to be more adaptable as leaders or just as staff? And what might you do differently based on what you learned today? So Victoria's going to move you into breakouts, and we're going to continue this discussion, and then we'll wrap up after that.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody, to the large group. It is awesome. Anyone want to share a large takeaway? Maybe one or two big takeaways from the session today, the conversations you just had. Anyone want to share? You can unmute, you can put it in the chat, whatever works best for you. I know there was a lot of great stuff.
We had, Mary Lou said that we were talking about various things, and that adaptability is not abandonment, because there are things that I was thinking more, we don't want to go away. And this was more of a relationship type situation. But I like that thought that you gave me.
Yeah, that reminds me of something Laura said about how we're all a team. And it's there are things that are so relational, and connecting back to the EQ component, the emotional intelligence component. Is there another large takeaway anyone would like to share, something that really stood out?
Victoria, we kind of talked about, and you can see it here, right? We're joining each person in their living room, dining room, bedroom, office, wherever they are. So this has kind of turned things as a manager. Aaron talked about this a little bit on edge, because before it was you had your work life and you had your personal life, right? And now they're kind of morphing together, where people are working from home. So now, where does your work life end? Where does your home life start? Those kind of things. And how do you get separation? For some people, it's a drive home. You can decompress, things like that. How do you manage that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and support one another in managing that. I think Kathy kind of mentioned that in her part, with focus on her team. So there's a lot. I know I have a lot of takeaways. There were a lot of great things here. I appreciate the component about the bubblegum brains. I know in the component that we had talked about, kind of circles back to the piece about having an empty teacup, having a growth mindset, right? That's awesome. Essential for leaders. Sticking close to your mission. Always lots of great reminders for all of this. Thank you for joining us, everyone. We hope you can join us for the next session on Wednesday, March 10 on stewardship and sustainability. I think that's so connected to all of this. If you haven't already done so, please be sure to sign up and invite your friends, family, neighbors, and coworkers, your team members. It is just like this, open to anyone who lives or works in Greene County, and it is free. We are going to follow up this session with an email next week with additional resources and information. I love that everybody I've gotten lots of messages asking for the documents and everything. So that will be posted and that will be shared. With that, thank you so much for joining us for the February Greene County Leaders Session. Thank you to Kathy and Laura for sharing everything you did. It is an absolute joy to be in community with all of you. Stay safe, everyone.
Bye.
Thank